Welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm Alicia Branham, author, coach, speaker, and founder of brand marketing, and this is the Alicia Branham Podcast. I want to start today by saying something that might make a few of you really uncomfortable out there, and that's okay. You can't build a modern business with an old school thinking. You just can't do it. And I don't say that to be dramatic, and I don't say that to be disrespectful of the past. I say it because after more than 16 years working in and around manufacturers, manufacturer reps, distributors, and sales teams, I've watched the cost of not evolving show up over and over again. And every year, that cost gets higher. It shows up as missed opportunities. It shows up as strained relationships. It shows up as businesses working harder for less traction, not because they're bad at business, not because they don't care, but because they're operating from playbooks that were written from a different time, like decades ago. What's wild to me is that after all these years, one of the biggest things that hasn't changed at all is the relationship and the expectations between manufacturers and manufacturer reps. And I don't mean that figuratively, I mean that literally. I've been hearing the exact same complaints from both sides since I first stepped into the space in 2009. Manufacturers say things like, our reps don't do enough. They don't push our lines hard enough. They don't understand our marketing goals. They don't give us enough visibility. But at the same time, I hear reps saying manufacturers expect everything for nothing. They don't understand our territories. They don't support us with marketing. They don't give us the tools we need to succeed. And when they give us grief for representing other manufacturers, including them, isn't that our job to represent all of our clients? That's crazy. And I feel like both sides genuinely believe that they're right. Listen, I've sat in those meetings. I've been on those calls. I've watched those emails go back and forth. And every time I think the same thing. I've heard this exact conversation before. Same frustration, same finger pointing, same unmet expectations, just a different year. The expectations are increased, the pressure's been increased, and the market has changed. But the structure of the relationship has barely moved. That's old school thinking, friends. Because when expectations evolve, but the model doesn't, resentment fills the gap. And when resentment replaces trust, everyone loses. And that outdated thinking doesn't stop at structure. It shows up in behavior too. One of the most consistent issues I see is outside sales flat out refusing to be visible. I get brought in to help with marketing, and what I find isn't a strategy problem, and it's not a budget problem. It's a people problem. Sales teams, they don't want to post on LinkedIn. They don't want to take time to take pictures on a job site. They don't want to share wins or updates. And the same excuses are always there. Well, that's marketing's job, right? My customers don't care about that. This industry, we're different. We don't need that. But when you strip it down, it's not strategy. It's discomfort. They're afraid of looking stupid. They're afraid of saying the wrong thing. They're afraid of being on camera. They're afraid of being judged. So instead of admitting fear and letting their ego get in the way, they hide behind tradition, and leadership often allows it. I have watched leaders complain about sales resistance and then turn around and say, well, we can't really make them do that. And that right there is the problem, man. That right there is a problem because visibility is no longer an option in this space we all are working in. Whether people like it or not, buyers are Googling you before meetings. They're checking you out on LinkedIn. They're forming opinions before a handshake has ever been made, okay? And refusing to show up doesn't protect your relationships, friends. It weakens them. That resistance has real consequences. Let me tell you a story about a client of mine who was told they represented too much. So I had a client who actually missed out on getting a new line. And on paper, they were solid, strong reputation, experienced team, and really good coverage. But when the manufacturer made their decision, the feedback was pretty blunt. You represent too much. You won't have time for us. From the client's perspective, that felt unfair because representing multiple line is their model. I mean, they have a team to feed, right? But here's where it mattered. That decision wasn't based on performance. It was based on perception. The manufacturer didn't see how they fit in. They didn't understand the structure. They filled in the blanks themselves. And that's what happens when you don't clearly tell your story. Someone else is going to tell it for you, and usually they're going to tell it wrong. So the line wasn't lost because the rep firm wasn't incapable. It was lost because the value wasn't visible. And that gap between reality and perception is where opportunities die, friends. But I've also seen the opposite when visibility is actually recognized. Just this year, I had 2 separate clients who did something very simple. They showed up consistently online. They highlighted job sites, people, projects, and partnerships. They tagged the manufacturers they represented. And you know something? It wasn't super flashy. It wasn't something super overproduced. And both of them were noticed. One was directly acknowledged by a manufacturer for their consistency and professionalism. The other was actually awarded for their social media and marketing efforts. Can you believe it? They got an award, but not for their follower counts, not for being loud, but for alignment. The manufacturers could actually see their brand as being well represented. And what surprised the reps most was that they didn't realize manufacturers were paying that close attention. Can I tell you, friends? They were. Because visibility removes uncertainty. It answers the questions before they're even asked. And that builds trust. That forced me to look inward at myself as a business owner in my organization. As I've built my business over the past 8.5 years, I've had to ask myself, if I'm asking clients to evolve, am I actually leading by example? Because clients actually started confiding in me in more than just about marketing. They started talking about leadership struggles. They started talking about sales frustrations, feeling stuck, pressure that they didn't feel safe sharing internally. And I realized that my role actually had changed. I wasn't just a marketing agency owner anymore. I was actually a sounding board, a problem solver, a trusted outside perspective. That, my friends, required leadership. It required showing up visibly, owning my voice, and modeling the change I was asking for. And when I did, something unexpected happened. Clients leaned in, trust deepened, conversations got more honest because leadership isn't about having all the answers. It's about being willing to stand in it with people, which brings me to the absolute final question of my podcast today. Are you being the leader that your team needs right now? Because if you want your business to scale, you've really got to ask yourself these questions, right? And are you the leader that your team needed 10 years ago? Or are you the leader they need today? Because scaling forced me to change that first. Not my team and not my clients. Me, little old me. I had to stop protecting comfort. I had to stop tolerating what capped growth at my business. I had to stop asking for change from my own clients without modeling it. Teams don't evolve because you ask them to. They evolve because you require it and you live it. Leadership isn't about control. It's about responsibility. And when leadership changes, the business follows. So here's my challenge. Question one belief you've been holding on to. Do one thing this week that feels uncomfortable. Show up once visibly and intentionally. Stop hiding behind tradition because modern businesses aren't built by people waiting for permission. They're built by people willing to evolve. Listen, old school thinking builds nostalgia, but modern thinking builds growth. And if something in this episode hit close to home, that's not an accident. Follow me and subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss the next episode. And please, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Listen, I'll see you on the next episode of the Alicia Branham Podcast.